will be a year to the day since 72 people lost their lives in the Grenfell fire. Now, investigations into what went wrong that night are still ongoing, but this morning it's been claimed that it could take up to 10 years to remove potentially dangerous cladding on all privately owned flats that have failed fire safety tests here in Wales. In an exclusive interview with BBC Wales, the Welsh Government's Chief Fire Safety Advisor, Des Tidbury, says there could be years of wrangling over who's responsible for paying for the changes. But until then, extra fire safety measures have been put in place. David Price lives on the 7th floor of a social housing block in Newport, which has cladding that's failed safety tests. Now, that's due to be replaced in August, but he still feels concerned.
My partner pointed this out to me. At the present moment, this building is unsafe. And I thought, no, I know we got the sprinklers and everything. But then I thought about it, and I'm thinking, well, she's right. Because it's still unsafe. No, the cladding is still on the building. I know it's not a 5-minute job. I understand all that. But at the present moment, at this time, this is an unsafe building.
Well, with us now is David Wilton, Director of TPAS Cymru, a tenant organisation for Wales, also a member of the Welsh Government's Fire Safety Advisory Group, which was set up after the fire. Morning, David.
Good morning. How
many properties are there? How many buildings in Wales that have this kind of cladding?
There isn't a great deal. There are some in the private sector. You've seen down in Cardiff and places like that. There are some in the social housing, like your report just said, in Newport City Homes, but some great work is already going on with Newport City Homes to get that resolved. And as you rightly said, the question now is in the private sector, how many need to be done? What type of improvements need to be done? Because some of it's not just about cladding, it's about sprinkler systems. Some is minor work and some of it's quite major.
The Welsh Government have come up with £3 million for Newport City Homes to carry out the work on, and that's the only social housing project in Wales that's affected.
Yes.
Why, or is there money? Is there money available to in the private sector for people to get the work done?
Not currently. I mean, the reality is you would argue it's for the private sector to resolve, but that could take a long time. Who's to pay? And even if you knew who was to pay, whether it's the leaseholder, the building owner, or the original builders, have they got the money to pay it? It could take, as I say, the report said, 10 years. So there are some sort of options out there in terms of possibly Welsh Government looking at a loan to get the work done, make these buildings safe, and then maybe repay it over long term through service charges.
Are the Welsh Government looking at that?
I believe that's something that the Landlord Association, the RLA, are pushing at the moment with Welsh Government and having conversations about. I think it's an interesting proposal, as long as it's not the taxpayer who's paying for, ultimately for these private sector homes to be made safe.
Yeah, I suppose, but if it averts a tragedy, taxpayer
absolutely
might not mind paying. I tell you who wouldn't like to pay, and that's the people who are already paying huge rents to live in these places in the first place.
Yes.
See their rents go up.
So yeah, I mean that could be a consequence, but normally the service charges and things like that are paid by the landlord, the owner of the property. And yeah, it could take some time, and these fees could go on for quite a long time to make these buildings safe. Yeah,
especially if there's going to be some sort of contest between the freeholder, the person that owns the building, the leaseholder, and sometimes there are very complicated situations, aren't there, about who owns what and who's responsible for what. Then you throw the builder in as well, who did the work in the first place. I mean, these could end up in court, couldn't they? If there's a lot of money?
Very much so. Yeah, without doubt, it will take many years to resolve this. And the issue is if we don't do something at the moment, we have unsafe buildings potentially with some of them. And secondly, that also has knock-on effects for people being able to buy or sell them, because there's this unknown risk to them or unknown financial burden to them. And therefore, you could get a whole stalemate in the property market for quite some time.
Difficult situation. Thank you, David. Thanks for coming in to see us this morning. David Wilton, who's the Director of TPAS Cymru. More on this later in the programme.
Radio Wales.
First is Lynn Morgan with the morning's news.
Good morning. Wales's Chief Fire Safety Officer says it could take years to pinpoint who should pay to remove dangerous cladding from private flats here. Speaking to BBC Radio Wales a day before the first anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire, Des Tidbury says extra safety measures are in place until the process of establishing liability is complete. Douglas Haig is the Vice Chair of the Residential Landlords Association.
We're asking the Welsh Government to put forward a loan fund, to help get this cladding replaced so that people can live in the knowledge that their building is safe. And let's look at how we get the liability for that in the long term resolved after.
The Welsh Government says tenant safety is a priority. The team that investigates illegal money